So, you believe that psychological safety is critically important for your team, but you work on a team that doesn't quite have it yet. What do you do? In this video, I'm going to go through 7 different ways, practical things that you can do to improve your own psychological safety and the psychological safety for your whole team. You ready? Here we go. Tip number 1 is to lead with vulnerability. Many leaders and many managers believe that they have all the answers and that they can't be wrong. Or if they don't actually believe it, they act like they believe it to their team. Well, if you as a manager or a leader can't admit your mistakes, why would you expect your team to do the same to you? So the first thing that you can do is to lead with vulnerability. Admit when you're wrong. Admit when you don't have all the answers, and you'll find your team will do the same. Tip number 2, get out of success theater. Credit for the term success theater goes to John Cutler. It's a fantastic term that I think many of us intuitively understand what it means. It's the idea that everyone acts as if things are fine when everybody knows that they're not. You've probably been in meetings like this before, where people are talking about all the vanity metrics that they're hitting and how things are going really well, but under the surface, you all know it's really not. It's smoke and mirrors. Get out of success theater by starting to admit that we all operate in a VUCA world. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And because of that, if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not pushing hard enough. You're not taking enough risk. Because if we operate in a VUCA world, mistakes will be made, and we need to talk about them openly and transparently. Tip number 3 is to ask the dumb questions. Sometimes people don't ask things because they think everyone else knows the answer, and they don't want to admit that they're the only one who doesn't know. Well, if you didn't pick up on this in grade school, you should learn it now. If you have a dumb question, I can almost guarantee you that at least one other person on the team is wondering the exact same thing. Now, it can be scary to be the first one to admit that you don't know something that seems like it should be obvious. So ideally, this starts from the top. If you're a manager, ask the dumb questions, even if you know the answer, because it shows to other people that it's okay to ask these types of questions and encourages them to do the same. Tip number 4 is to cultivate a learning mindset. When mistakes are made, many of us immediately go into blame mode. You didn't do this, or you made a mistake and I'm mad at that. Don't do that. Instead, cultivate a learning mindset that encourages people to ask questions like, so, what did we learn from this experience? Or how can we prevent this in the future? By the way, if that sounds like a retrospective, it's because it really is. Retrospectives are learning events. So use that type of mindset outside of the retrospective context too. It'll help you with your psychological safety. Tip number 5, and this comes straight from Google. Be inclusive in your decision making. Think about the last time your boss made a decision that you fundamentally disagreed with, but your boss didn't give you a chance to voice your opinion before that decision was made. Did you approach him or her to explain why you disagreed with the decision after the fact? It's unlikely unless you had a high degree of psychological safety that existed beforehand, which is why the more inclusive you are in decision making, the more people will have an opportunity and a forum to speak up before the decision was made, thereby increasing psychological safety. In essence, being inclusive in decision making is telling your team that I need you for help to make this decision, and that boosts everyone's safety. Tip number 6, use the retrospective prime directive. Now, if you haven't heard of the retrospective prime directive, it comes from Norm Kurth, who's the father of retrospectives, actually predates agile in the first place. And the retrospective prime directive goes like this, quote, regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. In essence, what the retrospective prime directive is doing is asking you to assume positive intent on behalf of everyone on your team. And therefore, when you have to say to someone else that they made a mistake or that something went wrong, those comments come from a place of empathy and of love instead of a place of criticism. That type of mindset can really help build trust and psychological safety on your team. And finally, tip number 7, ask for help and for feedback. When you ask for help, you're doing something really amazing. You're admitting that you don't have all the answers. When you ask for feedback, you're doing something amazing. You're admitting that you could improve the next time. And by taking the first step to ask someone for help or for feedback, you're going to encourage them to do the same to you when it's their turn. And conversations like that are building blocks to long-term psychological safety that you and your team will feel. So those are 7 tips to improve psychological safety that you can apply tomorrow. And keep reading the chapter 7 in the Ultimate Guide here to learn a few more on how you can improve psychological safety with your team.